You are Zhu Yuanzhang, founder of the Ming Dynasty, and you're standing in the forbidden city you built to keep the world out. But the walls aren't protecting you from enemies anymore. They're protecting you from the terror that you might have become exactly what you once fought to destroy. Because the peasant who toppled an empire is now killing anyone who might remember he used to be one of them. If this sounds like the kind of history that refuses to let you look away, hit subscribe. We're exploring stories that show what power actually costs. The year is 1368, and a former Buddhist monk who once begged for rice has just declared himself Emperor of China. Zhu Yuanzhang didn't inherit the throne. He didn't marry into it. He clawed his way up from absolute poverty, survived famine, watched his family starve, joined a rebel army out of desperation, and then systematically outmaneuvered every rival until the Mongol Yuan Dynasty collapsed beneath him. This should be the ultimate success story, the beggar who became emperor, proof that the mandate of heaven could belong to anyone virtuous enough to seize it. But Zhu Yuanzhang knows something his subjects don't yet understand. He knows exactly how he won. And that knowledge is about to transform him into one of the most paranoid, ruthless, and effective autocrats in Chinese history. Because here's what happens when someone who has nothing suddenly controls everything. They remember with perfect clarity how fragile power actually is. The Ming Dynasty begins with genuine reform. Zhu Yuanzhang, now the Hongwu emperor, implements policies that actually help common people. He redistributes land seized from Mongol nobles to Chinese farmers. He lowers taxes. He orders a population census to ensure fair tax distribution. He creates the yellow register system to track households and prevent corruption. He builds granaries to prevent the kind of famine that killed his family. These aren't symbolic gestures. These are structural changes designed by someone who understands poverty from the inside. His officials are shocked by how much he works. The emperor reviews memorials personally, sometimes reading hundreds of documents in a single day. He meets with ministers at dawn. He inspects grain storage facilities. He interrogates tax collectors about discrepancies. This isn't ceremonial rulership. This is someone who survived by paying attention to details. And he's applying that same obsessive focus to governing 60 million people. But underneath the reform, something else is growing. Hongwu keeps lists. He remembers who supported him when, who hesitated, who seemed too ambitious, who asked too many questions. He remembers the generals who fought beside him, yes, but he also remembers they know how to win wars. He remembers the officials who helped him build the bureaucracy, but he also remembers they understand how power flows through institutions. And most dangerously, he remembers the scholars and advisors who wrote the propaganda legitimizing his rule, which means they could, theoretically, write propaganda legitimizing someone else's. Everyone around him is a potential threat because he used to be exactly the kind of person who threatens emperors. The purges begin quietly in 1380. Hu Weiyong, the Grand Counselor and one of Hongwu's oldest allies, is accused of treason. The evidence is questionable allegations of communicating with Mongol remnants, of accepting bribes, of building a faction within the government. What's not questionable is what happens next. Hu Weiyong is executed. Then his family is executed. Then his associates are executed. Then people who once worked with his associates are executed. The purge expands like a stain, consuming roughly 15,000 people, 15,000 executions from one accusation. But Hongwu doesn't stop there. He abolishes the entire position of Grand Counselor, the office Hu held, because he's decided that any official powerful enough to coordinate government policy is, by definition, powerful enough to threaten him. Instead, he takes direct control of all 6 ministries himself. The workload is crushing. He doesn't care. Better exhaustion than vulnerability. Then comes the case of the empty treasury, another purge, another wave of executions. Officials in the Ministry of Revenue are accused of embezzlement. Some probably were corrupt. The Yuan dynasty's collapse had created chaos in financial record-keeping, and opportunities for theft were everywhere. But Hongwu's response isn't proportional investigation, it's systematic annihilation. He orders mass arrests of anyone connected to revenue collection. Torture is used to extract confessions and names. Those names lead to more arrests, more torture, more names. The purge consumes approximately 30,000 people this time. Provincial administrators, local tax collectors, clerks who processed grain shipments, merchants who traded with officials all killed. Some were probably guilty. Most were likely just unlucky enough to be in the wrong administrative chain when the emperor's suspicion landed there. Hongwu has a specific torture technique developed for officials he believes have betrayed him. It's called plucking the sinews, exactly what it sounds like. He wants them to understand, physically, the price of disappointing him. But here's where it gets psychologically interesting. Hongwu genuinely believes he's protecting the people. In his mind, corruption is the disease that destroyed the Yuan Dynasty and starved his family. Every official he kills is a potential future corrupt official. Every purge is preventive medicine. He's not being cruel, he's being thorough. He's not paranoid, he's realistic about human nature, because he climbed to power by exploiting that nature himself. When he orders entire families executed, he's not being vindictive, he's eliminating future revenge seekers. It's all logical, all defensible, all completely insane. He writes his own legal code, the Daming Lu, which includes punishments for crimes that haven't even been invented yet. Punishment for behaving suspiciously near the palace. Punishment for forming friendships that might lead to factionalism. Punishment for speaking in ways that could be interpreted as criticism. The code is brilliant and terrifying, a legal framework designed by someone who understands that power is maintained through fear, but who needs that fear to look like justice. His poetry from this period still survives. Here's a man who writes competent verse about missing his peasant childhood, about the beauty of simple farm life, about wishing he could return to poverty's moral clarity. Then he signs the execution orders for another 1,000 people and goes to bed. By 1393, the cycle reaches its peak with the Lan Yu case. Lan Yu, one of Hongwu's most successful generals, a man who helped conquer the Mongols, is accused of planning rebellion. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. What matters is the emperor's response. Lan Yu is executed, along with his entire extended family, his friends, his associates, and anyone who ever served under his command. Approximately 15,000 more deaths. But this purge is different. This one finally breaks something in the bureaucracy. Because Lan Yu wasn't just any general, he was one of the founding heroes of the dynasty. If even he isn't safe, if even proven loyalty and military success can't protect you, then safety is an illusion and service is suicide. The terror becomes institutional. Hongwu creates the Jinyiwei, the embroidered uniform guard, a secret police force answerable only to the emperor. They have authority to arrest anyone, including other officials. They can use torture without trial. They report directly to Hongwu, bypassing all normal administrative channels. It's an organization designed around the principle that trust is weakness and surveillance is survival. Officials start writing their wills before attending morning court because they genuinely don't know if they'll return home. Some develop elaborate systems of euphemism and indirect language, trying to communicate without saying anything that could be interpreted as threatening. But Hongwu is smart enough to recognize evasion, so indirect speech becomes its own crime. You can be killed for speaking too clearly or too vaguely. The only safe option is silence. But silence can be interpreted as sullenness, which is also punishable. The emperor is creating perfect isolation through perfect fear. Here's the count so far. Approximately 100,000 people executed during Hongwu's 30-year reign. Most of them officials, scholars, and military leaders, the educated class that makes government function. For comparison, that's roughly the entire population of a major Chinese city at the time, just eliminated. But the fear doesn't just eliminate people, it eliminates competent. Because who wants to be an official when the job description includes might be tortured to death based on the emperor's mood? Talented people stop seeking government positions. Those already in office become paralyzed, afraid to make decisions because any decision might be interpreted as overreach. Initiative dies, innovation dies. The bureaucracy becomes a machine for self-preservation rather than administration. And Hongwu notices this. He writes angry edicts demanding that officials show more courage, take more responsibility, stop being so timid. He seems genuinely confused about why people who've watched their colleagues skinned alive for minor mistakes aren't eager to take risks. The same man who created the terror can't understand why everyone is terrified. In 1397, something interesting happens. A scholar named Fang Xiaoru writes an essay arguing that the emperor's policies, while well-intentioned, might be creating unintended problems. It's carefully worded, respectful, theoretical. Fang isn't criticizing Hongwu directly. He's exploring philosophical questions about governance and trust. Hongwu reads it, appreciates the intelligence, promotes Fang Xiaoru. Then, a year later, decides Fang might be too intelligent, which makes him dangerous. Executes Fang's uncle on unrelated charges as a warning. Fang Xiaoru gets the message, stops writing about governance theory, lives. This is the system at its peak. Effective enough that criticism can be tolerated briefly, paranoid enough that tolerance always has an expiration date. Hongwu's sons are watching all of this. They're princes, technically safe, but they've seen uncles purged, cousins executed, childhood tutors killed. They understand that blood relation provides no protection if the emperor decides you're a threat. His eldest son and designated heir, Zhu Biao, seems to have been a moderating influence, someone who could occasionally talk his father down from extreme measures. Contemporary accounts suggest Zhu Biao saved several officials from execution by personally intervening. Then, in 1392, Zhu Biao dies, probably from natural causes, though some sources suggest the stress of managing his father's paranoia contributed. Hongwu is devastated. This is the one person he trusted, the one relationship that felt safe, and now he's gone. The emperor's response is to make Zhu Biao's son, his grandson, Zhu Yuanzhang, the new heir, skipping over his own surviving sons. It's an unusual choice, and it plants the seeds for a succession crisis that will eventually tear the early Ming Dynasty apart. But in 1392, Hongwu is just trying to honor his dead son by protecting his line. The purges intensify after Zhu Biao's death, as if Hongwu is trying to eliminate all potential threats to his grandson's future reign. More officials die, more families are destroyed. The terror, which had briefly seemed to be stabilizing, expands again. By the end of his reign, Hongwu has created something genuinely new in Chinese political history. A system where the emperor doesn't just rule, but actively terrorizes the ruling class. Previous dynasties had purges, coups, political violence, but usually targeted at specific factions. Hongwu's purges are comprehensive, systematic, almost algorithmic. If you serve in government long enough, the probability of being purged approaches certainty. And yet the dynasty survives. The economy grows, the tax system functions, infrastructure improves. The peasants, the class Hongwu came from, generally prospered during his reign. He's a terrible emperor for officials and a relatively good emperor for common people, which is exactly what you'd expect from someone who remembers being hungry. When Hongwu dies in 1398, he's ruled for 30 years. He's 71 years old. His grandson becomes the Jianwen emperor and immediately tries to undo the damage by recalling purged officials' families, reducing the power of the secret police, promoting civil discourse. It's a genuine attempt at reform. It lasts 4 years. Then one of Hongwu's sons, the Prince of Yan, Zhu Di, launches a rebellion, claiming he's protecting his father's legacy from weak leadership. The Jianwen emperor tries to defend himself, but discovers that his grandfather killed or terrified all the competent generals. The rebellions succeed. The Jianwen emperor disappears, probably killed, possibly fled into hiding. Zhu Di becomes the Yongle emperor and immediately restores many of Hongwu's policies, including the secret police and the culture of fear. Because here's what Zhu Di understood that his nephew didn't. Their father and grandfather had created a system where brutality was structural, not personal. You couldn't reform it away. You either used the terror to maintain control or you got destroyed by someone who would. The Ming Dynasty would last 276 years, making it one of the longest-lived Chinese dynasties. And for that entire duration, Hongwu's shadow would persist the bureaucracy he shattered, the paranoia he institutionalized, the precedent he set that emperors should fear their own officials more than foreign enemies. Modern historians count approximately 100,000 executions during Hongwu's reign, but the real number is probably higher. Records were destroyed, families erased so completely that even their names disappeared. The terror was efficient enough to hide its own scope. Archaeological evidence tells part of the story the documents can't. Mass graves near Nanjing, the Ming capital, containing skeletal remains showing signs of torture and execution. Inscribed tablets, listing crimes so vague they could mean anything. Disturbing the emperor's peace, showing insufficient loyalty, suspicious behavior. These weren't judicial executions, these were administrative ones, processed through a bureaucracy of fear. Here's the question that haunts historians. Was Hongwu insane, or was he a genius who understood power better than anyone else? Because you could argue both. The paranoia was real, the man clearly couldn't trust anyone, couldn't sleep without suspecting plots, couldn't accept loyalty without wondering if it was performance. That's pathology. But the system he built lasted centuries and kept China unified through periods when other empires were fragmenting. That's genius. Maybe the answer is that they're the same thing. Maybe you can't rise from absolute poverty to absolute power without developing psychological patterns that look like madness but function like strategy. Maybe Hongwu's mistake wasn't being paranoid, it was being correct about how fragile power is, and then trying to make it permanent through violence. There's a detail from his final years that captures something essential. Hongwu commissioned his own tomb and designed it personally. It's enormous, fortified, filled with traps and false passages. Even in death, he's trying to prevent betrayal, trying to protect himself from people who might desecrate his grave. The tomb still stands outside Nanjing. It was never robbed, never desecrated, never touched. Because here's the thing about ruling through terror. It works. People are still afraid of him 600 years later. The beggar who became emperor and then became executioner left behind a dynasty, a capital city, a legal code, and approximately 100,000 corpses. History remembers him as a founder, a reformer, and a monster, somehow all simultaneously accurate. Maybe that's the actual lesson here. The tools you use to gain power become the tools you use to keep it. And if you gained power through suspicion and violence, those become your governing principles. Hongwu didn't betray his principles when he started purging officials. He was being perfectly consistent. He just applied peasant rebellion tactics to imperial administration. If you've made it this far, you're someone who values the uncomfortable truths hiding in history. Subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more forgotten stories to uncover together. Before you go, if you had absolute power and remembered exactly how you seized it, could you ever stop seeing threats everywhere? Drop your thoughts below. Thanks for watching.